Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back for another episode. This is Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and you're tuned into the Networking RX podcast. For those who don't know, I have a second podcast. I started it about maybe 6 months after I had started the first. The second podcast is called the Networking RX Minute. It's a 1 minute daily, hence the word minute. And, initially when I started out doing it, my thought was, okay, I'm going to release this every day. Let me get to 365, and then I can just recycle it and just let it play on a loop, and every day there would be something different. I found that I had more than 365 days of material. I probably had 2 years of material that I could do, just little snippets on this and that. And I would be good, and that would be the end of it. It's 365 plus 365, 700 something. You do the math, 730. At any rate, I quickly realized that I probably had a lot more material than that once I started quoting from people, and just people would give me books, or people I would interview on podcasts would have books, and I would buy those books, and there would be interesting insights in there, things that I hadn't talked about at all in any of the episodes I had done or planned to do. And I wanted to be able to, one, have additional content to share and additional voices to share. And so I continued on with that. And, right now, sitting here, I'm fast approaching 1,000. And is there no end in sight? I don't know. I kind of am in a rhythm with it, and every month I recycle 15, meaning I'll take 15 from the past and reuse those, and so I'm only really having to draft and record and produce about 15 a month, which isn't horrible. I can kick out 5 drafts of Networking RXs a week, no problem. Just here or there, just spare time. An inspiration hits me. A lot of times I'll be interviewing somebody on the podcast. They'll say something. I'm like, oh, that's really neat. I'm going to quote you, and I will put that in, or I'll read something. At any rate, someone said something to me, and I created a Networking RX minute out of it. It's going to be episode 902. I'm not sure how that's going to line up with respect to the release of this particular podcast. But the title of that podcast is Apples and Seeds. And what I found once I surrendered to the notion that I wasn't going to stop at 365 or 730, or when I was done with my material, it's allowed me, or caused me, to become very in tune to what other people are saying, the insights that people have, and I might otherwise just let things slip by, but now it's like I feel like I'm on this constant search for great material, something that I can write up into literally a post of about 150 words. That's what I end up doing, and then record it. And so something that somebody had said to me, well, not just somebody, it was Dr. Rob Bell, somebody I've had on the podcast before. I've been on his podcast. He is a sports psychologist, mental toughness guru, works with a lot of PGA golfers, tennis players, soccer players, and very insightful. Written a number of books out there. One I quote from often, No One Gets There Alone. Another one that I will be quoting from, Puke and Rally. So very insightful. But he had said something to me in response to something I had done. I had introduced him to some people, and his comment to me was, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. And I had to read that twice. I love those lines like that where it kind of flips on itself. I'm sure there's a term for it. I I use them all the time. You can take the boy out of Michigan, but you can't take the Michigan out of the boy is one of the things I use here in Columbus because I grew up in Michigan and now I live in Ohio State country, and there's a friendly rivalry, maybe a bitter rivalry for some. So I like those where these things flip, and it makes you think. It breaks your thinking machine. You get out of that routine thinking. So I really started to think about, okay, what are you saying here, Rob? And I actually looked it up online, and it's not Rob's original saying, and he would probably tell you that. It's really not anybody's original saying. It floats out there. I found a number of references to it, and that's neither here nor there. But what I wanted to do is just kind of talk about what that means and what the relationship is to networking, because that's how it was originally posed to me. I had introduced him to somebody, and he was basically saying that that's a seed, and you can't count the number of apples in that. So I did a little research. The average apple contains about 5 to 8 seeds, and but then each of those seeds has the potential to become a tree, and then each of those trees will bear apples season after season, and then each of those apples hold seeds that continue to produce, for eons and eons. And it's a powerful notion. And obviously, it goes beyond mere fruit. You could literally have one apple seed, and blanket the earth in apple trees. It might take generations to do it. I don't know about the diversity of apples or how that all works out, but literally that's what can happen. But it also has applications to the relationships within our network. When you help another with certainly an introduction, or maybe it's an insight or an opportunity, you move them forward. You move them forward, and they're enabled to do the same. So this is what I said in the Networking RX Minute. When you do something for another, you're just but one person, but your deeds like an apple seed, and it goes on and on and on. And I really got to thinking about this over the weekend because I'm recording this. It's just before Christmas, and somebody had put a post up. I'd sent them a book. Went all the way to Estonia. If you're not familiar, Estonia is it's on the Gulf of Finland. This person lives on the Gulf of Finland, and which is right across from Finland. So I thought Estonia, I didn't realize Estonia I knew it was in Europe. I didn't know it was that far north in Europe. For some reason or another, I thought it was closer to the Middle East. This is not a show about my geography ignorance, but if you stick around long enough, you'll realize it. But anyhow, I'd sent this person a copy of my book, and it got there, and she put a post up, and it was a very nice post. But I got to thinking about the relationship. And I got to thinking about, okay, how did the relationship come to be? Well, I had met this particular person because I was invited into a monthly mastermind that she holds on every second Tuesday of the month, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. They're 6 hours ahead of us, so I believe it's 4:30 their time, 5:30, depending upon the time of year. But anyhow. So I got invited into this. That's how I met her. And then I thought about, okay, the person who invited me. How did I meet the person who invited me? Her name is Crystal. The woman in Estonia is Marlies. And Crystal invited me to this mastermind. From that mastermind, I had the opportunity to talk with Marlies, and she's appearing on my podcast. And I'm on hers, and then I will interview her on mine here in the coming weeks. So I was introduced to this mastermind by Crystal. And well, okay, how did I meet Crystal? Well, I met Crystal by a wonderful person, Simon Town. Simon is in the UK. Simon is a super connector got on the phone with Simon, and right away he's like, yeah, I just, it's my thing. Before we're done, before the day's over, I'm going to connect you to 3 other people. And he did. And Crystal was not one of them. Crystal was probably, 11 or 12, maybe 24, 25. I mean, Simon is just absolutely prolific in introducing me to people. So had the opportunity to meet Crystal from Simon, met Simon from a gentleman that is in Toronto, Canada. He's an American living in Toronto, Brian Bashan. Brian, is a coach. I won't get into everyone's story, but how did I meet Brian? Well, I met Brian from a woman in San Francisco, Sajal Thacker. All these people you'll notice I've interviewed on my podcast. I don't interview everybody I talk to, but I've got this string of great people that I've been connected to. And Sajal is she's a diversity and equity inclusion person. Does a lot of stuff on bias, and very interesting topic. She's got a wonderful TEDx talk out there that you can find. It's Sajal Thacker. If you're interested, shoot me a note and I'll connect you. But Sajal was connected to me by Scott Mason, who is in New York City. He was born in England, put up for adoption, adopted by a U.S. family, U.S. military family, brought to Manhattan, Kansas, went to college in Northfield, Minnesota, Carleton College, and then from Carleton he headed to the Big Apple. He went from Manhattan to Manhattan. I joke with him. I don't know if he lives in Manhattan, Kansas. I don't know if he lives in Manhattan in New York City. But nonetheless, he's in New York. Well, how did I meet Scott Mason? I met Scott Mason from this a woman that I know, gotten to meet, Kimberly Rice. Kimberly Rice is an author. She's a podcaster, does a lot of work in the areas of empowerment for women, and is very committed to that, very passionate about that. And how I met Kimberly was simply through us connecting together on LinkedIn and saying, you're interesting, let's have a conversation. No agenda. And we've both been on one another's podcasts. And she's not an attorney, but she's done a lot of work with law firms as well. So Kimberly's the seed. And Kimberly Kimberly introduced me to Scott. And, and she's introduced me to other people too. And I could probably spend a whole day in a series of podcasts just kind of walking through how these things all manifest themselves, especially when you get to somebody like Simon Town, who, again, it might be 24 or 25 people that I'm having the opportunity to talk with, and hopefully I'm just as productive for him as well. But, I credit it all back. It all goes back to Kimberly Rice, and that, she was kind of that apple seed that I can't count the number of apples. And I'll never know the number of apples. I could never sit down with Kimberly and say, I want to show you all that you've done, because, quite frankly, all that she's done will continue on and on and on. And, in fairness, you have to kind of give props to the things that happen downstream with respect to that. So the point I'm trying to make here is that when you do things for other people, or when people do things for you, but when you do things for other people, it's not really a one-off thing. There's a lasting benefit to it. And, assuming that they're honest with you about what it means to them. And I have a lot of people who come back to me, and that was the reason why Rob Bell came back to me and said, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. He was basically saying, you've made some introductions for me, and those just continue to go on and on and on, bearing fruit. Much like the story I just shared, and kind of walking people through step by step by step all that it means. It's really kind of amazing. And so that ought to inspire us to do more introducing of people, more introducing people, more giving people opportunities. You give somebody a fish, they eat for a day. You teach them to fish, they eat for a lifetime. Kind of a logic to it. If I hand somebody just a client and they get paid, that's nice. But when I make an introduction or maybe provide them some information that has some lasting insight, here's how you do this. Recently, somebody gave me information on here's how you can improve your posts. Those things have lasting benefits, and you just have to continue to, you have to continue to acknowledge the benefits that come from the benefits that come from those things, those introductions, those sharing of information, the giving of opportunities, or the alerting others to opportunities. So think about it. You can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. You can count the number of people in your network, but you really can't count all the things that network is going to do for you over time. And I probably need to get a better saying for that. I will. It'll hit me at some point, just not today. Just as a reminder, we're still looking for people to get into the AmSpirit team. If you're interested in being part of a referral-based networking organization, we are expanding across the country, talking to people from Portland, Oregon to Cape Cod, down to Miami, Florida, north to the Minneapolis area. We're quickly expanding across the country. Always interested in having more people involved in the program. If interested, reach out to me through the notes, the email I leave in the show notes, or the one we leave here at the end of the podcast.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.